Welcome to Conversations with Friends. I'm Meredith on the Brahma Kumari's meditation site. And, I was thinking about how we all harbor some kinds of secrets in our lives, right? It might be a little secret. We did something little in life. We did something bigger. Hopefully we've worked it out and it hasn't been, too difficult or that required any, dealing with a problem or anything. But, we've all go through things that we keep inside. Well, with my guest today, she actually isn't the one that harbored the secret. It was a very important part of her family you're going to hear about. And this secret actually really changed her life and the lives of many others. And so I want to welcome Linda Ambrus Broenniman. And Linda has really gone through an experience that is totally life-changing. She has written a book to tell us all about the story of finding out what her true religion was later in life. And I am thrilled to get to be here to interview her. So Linda, welcome to the program. And I want to start with your book. Let's start with your story, which actually happened in the 20s, right? You were in your late 20s.
Yes.
And you found out that, and it was just kind of like someone just sort of mentioning it in your family, and you didn't know you were born into a Catholic family. Your parents were both practicing Catholics. I think you went to church every single week.
Every Sunday.
And every Sunday, lots of kids in your family. And then you heard something that was going to change your life later on. So can you tell us a little bit about it and how it became this amazing book?
Well, thank you. First of all, Meredith, thank you for having me on this show. It's just an honor to be able to talk with you about this.
Maybe just give us a little idea about what happened. And again, it was a casual kind of thing, but then something really intensified some years later, didn't it?
So I was in graduate school and I came home. I was in my late 20s. I came home for some kind of vacation. I think it was Easter vacation. And I'll never forget, my brother walks into my room, said, "I've got a secret to tell you. We're actually Jewish." And so what had happened is my older sister had gone to, a meeting in Montreal and stayed with her godmother. And when she just asked her godmother a simple question, "What was my great-grandmother Margit like?" And she replied, "Well, like all Jewish women, she ruled the roost." So that was how my sister found out that we were Jewish. And then she came home and told my brother, and my brother told me, and it was this big secret. But I'm the middle child of 7. And I think I'm always the troublemaker. So I immediately went to my mother and I said, "Is this true?" And she said, "Yes, it's true." So that was how it all started.
And then I think I didn't mention the name of the book, the Politzer Saga. Forgive me. I was looking at my notes here and I went, "Oh, this book is an amazing book." With all the stories of the many relatives that you didn't even know that you had. Okay, so this happened, but then from what I gather, reading about everything, is that it didn't totally affect you yet, right? Or did it? Or was it life-changing at that moment when you found out, "Oh my God, I thought I was"?
Yeah, it really didn't. I think to be honest with you, religion wasn't that important, even though, as you said, we went to church every Sunday, but it just wasn't a big part of my life. And I was really, sort of focused on my career. I was in graduate school. What was I going to do? I was going to become independent of this big family and so on. And so I was focused on me and just really didn't pay attention until a lot later. But there were a couple trips that I took with my parents to Budapest. And one of them in 1990, after I had learned about the secret. So I was able to ask my mother certain things, and she told me some things, but I even learned later that she didn't tell the full truth at that point. So fast forward in 2006, my mother, all of a sudden we receive an invitation from the Israeli consulate in New York that my mother was to be honored as righteous among nations. And I don't know if your
Yeah.
listeners know what that is. It's the highest honor that non-Jews can receive for hiding people during the Holocaust. And of course, pretty much everyone knows who Oskar Schindler is, and those kinds of
Yeah.
people have received this award. But for my mom to receive it, and we really didn't know anything about it. So afterwards, I asked her best friend Ava Fisher Klein, who had nominated her for this award, and she had hid Ava, and along with Ava's family and many other people. So Ava told me a few things, but still very guarded, and you know, she would just say it's too painful to talk about. I don't want to talk about it. And then finally, in what happened in 2011, my parents' house caught fire.
Mm.
And miraculously, a box was saved. My sister had saved it and didn't even realize it, had put it in the back of her closet. So it was, nobody knew this box existed. And then in about 2016, 2017, I decided, okay, it is time for me to really investigate. I needed to learn who I was and where my roots were. So my sister happened to be cleaning out the closet and found the box and sent it to me. And that was the start of this incredible journey for me.
It really was a journey, you know, reading about the journey that you did go through. And you actually physically went on the journey too, didn't you?
Yes. Yes. I went to Budapest several times. So yes.
But you didn't mention, though, your dad. I mean, now he was alive when you found this out, right? He was still alive. So
Yeah.
from what he really didn't want any part of this, did he? I mean,
Well, he didn't know. We were keeping it a secret. So
really?
Okay. Yes, he was in his later stages of life. He died at 95 in 2020. So he was in the later stages of life, and my sister just didn't want to upset him. She thought he would be very upset, and he never ever admitted that to us that he was Jewish. So he took that to the grave.
Yeah. What do you think caused that? I mean, he had become Catholic, and so he was Catholic. You know, that you become something and you feel that that's who you are. That's your, you know, your, I don't want to say your image, but your new way of thinking, of just being in a way. And I'm just wondering, was it that he didn't want to kind of destroy this whole thing, or he was a physician like your mother, right?
Yes,
They were both
physicians.
Respected in the community for, you know, for their work and who they were and their family. And maybe it was just, was it like too much of a shock, you know, to him?
You know, it's a good question that I don't think we'll ever have the answer to.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was shocking to all of us, one of my nieces was married to a Jewish gentleman, and they asked him to say a few words at the wedding ceremony. And he did, and he read in Hebrew, and he read in perfect Hebrew. You know, people were just amazed. Afterwards, they said, "Where did you learn Hebrew? Because you didn't speak with any kind of accent or anything." This was, you know, he was incredible. So, but his answer, I mean, my father was just a master at deflecting questions, direct questions. And his answer was, "Well, I'm a real expert in languages. Do you know I speak Swahili?" So, and he did. He probably knew 8 or 10 different languages. He was incredible in languages. But that was his response. So I think it's really complicated. I think he viewed his life as a miracle that he survived, that he and my mother survived. And I think he believed in God. But I'm not sure, and I say this, but I don't really have any evidence for it. I'm not sure it mattered whether it was a Catholic God or a Jewish God to him. I think he just
That's beautiful.
He believed in God.
Yeah. And when you really look at all religions, don't they have that same message at some level? They have different ways of going about it, but there is one God for most people.
Yeah.
And so do you think it's do you think it's that he really in a way suffered? He went through a lot, in his earlier years. And many Holocaust survivors, he wasn't a Holocaust survivor, but he escaped, right? And many Holocaust survivors, for many years, they wouldn't talk about these things. They couldn't get it out, and they wanted to forget it and go on and be Americans, right? So I'm just wondering if that was part of it,
I'm sure that was part of it.
And you have a degree in psychology too, don't you? So I'm sure you've thought about this a lot. How did he think? What was going on in his head? Yeah.
Well, just as you said, he experienced incredible amount of trauma when he was, basically 19, 20 years old. He was in forced labor camp. He escaped when the forced labor camp was bombed, and almost everybody died. In his mind, I think a miracle that these 6 men, he was one of 6 men who survived. They were caught twice more before he made it back to Budapest. And then that's when my mother she was hiding Jews, and then he came and hid with her. But
miracle, isn't it? Yeah,
and one miracle after another that they survived. But I think so I think one was the trauma, but also I think he never wanted his children to experience any of that. And I think it was his way of protecting us.
Beautiful. And isn't that what all parents do? They really don't, they want to kind of hide any of the bad stuff or things that children might be afraid of.
Exactly.
I know with my own daughter, who now has 4 kids, she never likes me to even mention anything going on in the world, although these kids seem to know it. They're from 4 to 11 or something. They do it, but she doesn't want to, take anything away from their innocence and their exuberance about life. She doesn't want them to hear about things. I'm wondering if it's the same. Your father was, like you say, like protecting you all.
I think he was. We never talked about. There was just this web of secrecy in our house. They didn't want to talk about the war. They didn't talk about all of our ancestors. And I think again, it was complicated because in our dining room there was a large picture of my grandfather, but he never wanted to talk about it. It was his father. His father died as a result. We don't know if he actually died in Dachau or if he was in a forced march afterwards.
Yeah.
But these very painful, my father lost so many close relatives in the war that he just didn't want to go there at all.
It was like he wanted to forget hell in a way, horrible things happening, a horrible world and everything. And what I love that you have done in your book is, like you said, all of these amazing people, not just his family, but many people. You were able to find the stories and uncover these stories that you found in that box, right? And, and more. So maybe, you could tell us a little bit about how you did this. How do you go about you had letters, you had pictures, but you didn't really have stories yet, did you? Or little bits of stories?
No.
Yeah.
No, I had very few stories. And I think that's sort of another miracle that I look at. It's when I opened the box, there were all sorts of letters and documents, all in Hungarian, and I don't speak Hungarian at all. So I used to when I was 3, but that was a long time ago. So I needed somebody to translate. And through a friend of a friend, I found a woman who lives about a half an hour from me, and she's remarkable. I went to her house, and she was just this bundle of energy, and she helped me look at some of the documents. And she said to me, she said, some of these documents are very important documents, and you really need to find someone to help you research this and put these in context. Because I really didn't understand history. So that's another piece of this, is I needed to learn history and understand what my relatives, what these people were going through at the time. So anyway, back to, her name was Anna. Anna introduced me to Andras Kaczynski, who I actually dedicated the book to. He was a remarkable, he was Hungarian. He was a lawyer and a sociologist. And he was remarkable at finding information in places that I think nobody else could have found them. He's just a remarkable individual, and unfortunately died of colon cancer in 2021. But he'd become just sort of a trusted friend and partner throughout this whole process. And from one of the letters, he realized that I was related to people that still lived in Budapest. He got in touch with one of them, and she happened to have a book that was written by my great uncle, who had died in 1920, Zygmunt Politzer, and he had written a biography. He called Our Family History, and that's how we were able to go back and trace my relatives from the 1700s.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And what was amazing about Andras is he would take these stories and he would find other things that either confirmed or he just had to verify everything. And wanted to make sure that the sources of information were correct. He just verified and verified and verified. And so the resulting stories are what really happened, which is remarkable to find 8 generations of Pulitzers.
To be part of something so much bigger. Most people, I think, don't even know, can't even go back 1 or 2 generations, or they never have. And so you're talking about how many generations is that? That's
8
like
generations.
When I say from the 1700s on is, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Did you start to realize as you started to be the investigative reporter with him, that you had uncovered something that was not just for your own family? A lot of people, they do these kinds of investigations and they get a little information, but did you feel your story was bigger? It was a story for the world?
I wasn't, at the time, I wasn't really focused on it. I kept thinking that was our story.
Yeah.
But as Andras, he went to various sources, and as he went to various sources, he would talk to people about it. And one of the people he relied heavily on was people from the Hungarian Jewish Museum and Archives. And they had archives. We went into some of these archives. They have books that are huge and handwritten from the, way back from the 1700s, even before then. So they would go into places like that to find out, they were birth certificates, death certificates, seats that were owned by the synagogue and things of that nature. But as he started to explore this, then it just so happened that it coincided with the time when they were renovating the Rambach synagogue in Budapest.
Mm.
And they became very interested in these stories because, after the war, Hungary was communist, and the communists were just as anti-Semitic as the Nazis were. And so most people, a lot of Hungarians didn't know their roots. And they wanted to put together an exhibit that would help inspire people to find their own roots. And they decided to use the stories in the book as the basis for the exhibit. So that's when he asked me, would you be willing to share these stories with the world? I thought, wow, yeah, they deserve to be shared with the world.
Yes, because your stories are stories for the world to understand, and all the research that's gone into it. And so that's on exhibit right now, right? I mean, it continues in Budapest. Yeah.
Yes, it's a permanent exhibit in the Rambach synagogue.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, you've been on this journey. How have you changed as a result? You said, well, you never really, I mean, you were Catholic, and I don't even mean just religion-wise. You are Catholic, too, and Jewish, but religion to you, it's all religions have, are connected. And so it wasn't a big life changer in that sense, right? I mean, in terms of the beliefs. But I was just wondering, after going through something like this, and it was years, how long? 6 years? 6 years you were researching?
7 years. Yeah. Yeah.
So what has changed in you as a result of all of this?
I think a lot has changed in me. I think before, when you grow up with secrets, you don't know what those secrets are. And I think, we internalize them, even if we don't know consciously that they're secrets. I think subconsciously we do know. And I think that resulted in, thinking that there was something wrong with me. So I really didn't, I will say I was sort of wobbly. I didn't know my roots. I didn't have grandparents. Well, my grandmothers lived with us, but I didn't have grandfathers. I didn't know where we came from. We didn't have cousins. So we were really different, and I didn't know why we were different. And I think growing up, there wasn't a lot of self-confidence there because of that. I think with finding this, I've developed sort of a new self-confidence. I feel so much freer. I think there's the phrase, the truth will set you free. I think in my case, it really did. It really did set me free. And I can be so grateful and appreciative of these incredible people, and not, sort of angry at my father for keeping these secrets. I understand him better. And I can now honor these incredible people whose names were forgotten.
And their lives were incredible. I mean, maybe just share a couple of your favorite stories, or I mean, they were all amazing stories. Just a couple of stories, because these people had really interesting lives, didn't they? I mean, they really were everything from artists to, I think I read, industrialists to, I mean, musicians and doctors, but really a mix of all types of people from all different backgrounds and careers and everything. And
yes. Well, I think one of the people I really wanted to learn most about was my great-grandmother Margit, who I think was incredible. She grew up in the golden era of Budapest, when Budapest was expanding and becoming a major cultural center. And she and she grew up in privilege. Her father, my great-great-grandfather, Ignaz Misner, he's another incredible story. He, for example, grew up in poverty because he became an orphan because of the cholera epidemic. And then he rose to become a very prominent lawyer. So Margit was a founder, one of the founders of the Budapest Bar. So Margit was raised in privilege, and yet during World War I, she decided to become a nurse and really took care of a lot of World War I vets, which I think was pretty astounding at the time.
Yeah.
But also, you know, she was just one of these generous, most incredible people who cared about others so deeply. And she did a lot of volunteer work and a lot of philanthropic activities. And then comes World War II, and her mother had died when she was in her 30s, I think, so young. So she sort of took care of her father and her brother, and she took care of everybody. So World War II comes, and you know they have to move to the huge house where the whole family. It was an apartment house in Budapest that each family member lived in a different apartment in the apartment house. She had to collect all these households. They had to move into what they called a yellow star house. They had 1 week to move everything into where they were all going to live in one room together. So you think about what that takes, is extraordinary. But then she had been a socialite, and she used her web of connections to really help to hide people, to find safe places to hide her family. And she used many of the servants who, you know, had to be dismissed. They helped to take food and money and whatever people needed to these various hiding places. So she'd really tried to keep her family together. And, you know, unfortunately, she wasn't so successful. Her father died of starvation, actually, in the hospital in the ghetto. Her brother was shot and left in a mass grave in a labor camp. And so, yeah, there was, I think in the last page of the book, I
Dedicated it.
list about 30 or more relatives that had died in the Holocaust.
And
But
how
then,
life changed for people who had, like you say, not necessarily always rich, but people that had good lives, decent lives. You
right,
know, they went to
right,
work, they had their families, they lived in, you know, neighborhoods, and then everything changed, you know, when the Nazis came in and life changed. And one thing I think I was reading in your book was, you know, how people did do things to save themselves, try to become Catholic, as your father's family did, right? Just to keep their jobs, because if you were
right,
Jewish, you know, you would. I mean, life was going to be different, even though they didn't know what was in store for them. So people
exactly.
were doing things to protect themselves, weren't they? You know, just to
Yes,
keep life normal, and then as much as they could. And so, you know, there's so many stories in your book about just people's lives and what they went through, and there's so many heroes, aren't there? You
yes,
know?
yes. Well, you know, back to Margit for a second,
Yeah.
you know, after the war, there was a couple of years where Hungary tried to establish a democratic government.
Hmm.
And so her house they had lost the house, and well, they had 3 properties, all of which were taken over. But the house in Budapest had been bombed, so she had to pay to fix the house and so on. And then she had to sell numerous other properties just to live because the inflation was so horrific. But she tried to, you know, support her family as best she could. Once the communists came in, it was a whole different story. And she and my grandmother were actually expelled to work on a farm miles away. And here she was 75 at that point. So you can
Oh,
imagine that. And we have lots of letters that she wrote to the minister trying to, get things back. And, she received a small piece of paper saying, well, we've confiscated all your properties and your house. And finally, after Stalin's death, she was able to come back and move back into her house, and she was allowed 2 rooms in this gigantic apartment house. So, and yet, even with that, she had given one of her apartments and furniture to a Jewish mom who found herself, whose husband had been murdered, and found herself without anything. So even though Margie didn't have much herself, she was all about being generous and kind and helping others, which to me is incredible story.
And to me, stories like that are stories that really change lives, to me. It's whatever you go through and whatever suffering, there are people who rise, who rise out of the suffering and out of, the thinking about just themselves and their own lives to help others. They're the servers,
Exactly.
You have those in your family. And I can see that you must have been inspired over and over again while writing this book. And I know that you have said that this book is not just about the history. This book is about people's stories. And I think that's the beauty of this book, at this point in the world, to feel in a way this book has kind of got a message, not kind of, it does have a message for right now, for the times now,
Yes.
Things happening in the world and just the strife in the world and the uncertainty. And
I mean, when and I didn't really talk that much about my mother, but my mother was another, to me, real hero, just having saved so many people during the war, but also including my grandmother and my father. And we were always raised that no matter what our religion, no matter what our economic status or ethnicity, it didn't matter where people came from. We're all human beings together, and we have to treat everyone with respect and dignity. And I think that message has really come through, and it's a message that I think is so important today. We have to treat each other well and start talking, and the only way to solve all this strife is to start having conversations.
Well, that's a really good point. Conversations and trying to connect with others. And that's interesting because, you're being interviewed here by, on the Brahma Kumari's meditation site. And that's very aligned with the beliefs of the Brahma Kumaris that we say we're all brothers, we're all brothers and sisters. We say we're all spiritual energy. We're all souls.
Yes.
And everybody is to really be able to have love and respect for everyone, which is, to me, what is the message in your book, and what you've been through. And I didn't mention your background, and I do not want to end this interview without mentioning what you've done. You graduated from Swarthmore College, then you went to Carnegie Mellon and got your MBA, right? Then you left mainstream corporate America to become an entrepreneur, building companies in technology and biotech. So you've had quite a career yourself, and I think that's important that we mention this. And I suppose that it stopped, not stopped, you had to stop for a while if you were still working then to go on to this next part of your life, this next stage of your life, which took the researcher and the traveling and the piecing together these stories. Do you feel very fulfilled now about, instead of having questions anymore about what happened, why did it happen, why your father couldn't talk? You feel in a way everything's been answered and you kind of have clarity?
A lot has been answered. There's always a lot more. And what's really been fun for me with this book is that that there's been, first of all, I found cousins that I know are cousins. So that's been a real gift. But also, there's lots of Pulitzers that have reached out to me, and we're starting to explore whether we're related or not, because it was a huge family. So it's really fun to be able to connect with people on that level.
Yeah, so this whole process for you has been, from what I can see, has been a real gift for you
It has.
and many others. I thank you so much for being here to tell a bit of your story. I know, we could keep you here for hours. You have so many stories to tell, and they can find out about the stories and in the book, The Politzer Saga.
Yes.
And I congratulate you on this beautiful book, powerful book, and a book with a really important message. And it's really enjoying getting to meet you.
Oh,
And
Meredith,
get
thank you
to
so
interview you.
much. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me on this, and it's been such a joy talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, I feel the same way about you. And I think you need to be out there more and more. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of attention spreading this message. That's, messages are very important, powerful, loving, peaceful messages, and you have experience now, a lot of experience, from this journey that you've been on a journey. Definitely. And if anyone is really interested, of course, the book, and also if you get to Budapest, right?
Yes.
Go see the exhibition of your family, the story of your family.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you out there. And I want to thank Marianne Weiss, who's been our technical director today. And this has just been, for me too, a joy to get to interview Linda.
Thank you.
Om Shanti.